everyone. I wanted to put together this editing video for you because I realized I haven't done one in a little while, and this was one of my absolute favorite shoots I've ever done. So to give you a little bit of a behind the scenes on my editing and how I do things. So I do use presets. I have bought Embrace presets, and then I also use Strike a Pose's brush presets. But the regular presets, I use Embrace, and then I cut it down because they're meant for mostly boudoir shoots, and so the tones and the shadows are really heavy and so beautiful. But for my type of style, as you know, we tend to do a little bit more of a bright and airy, but also a moody element at the same time. So I apply my subtle, subtle, subtle glam preset is the first thing I do, and you can see already how much that does. It is an insane amount. And so I can get you in here and you can take a quick peek at what it did to the settings. Really, it affected everything except for texture and dehaze. The tone curve is pretty straight, but this is what it looks like without it. So you can see the difference between what my main settings in Lightroom did versus adding that tone curve into it. Makes all the difference. Now, I haven't actually learned how to manipulate a tone curve myself because I love what this one does so much. So moving on, you can see our color panel, which essentially what that does, show you before and after, it's just these little ones, little color adjustments. You can especially see it on her skin and how that changes. See, it gets a little bit more green toned, but it was a little bit too pink before. I always revert back to pink. If all else fails, go pink, but her skin was just a little bit too pink for my liking. Then, you know, we go down to sharpening, noise reduction, lens corrections, come put that back to profile. And that is essentially it. I will go ahead and tone the grain down some while I am here. I like to have a little bit of grain just to add some texture. I find that without grain, I think it just looks too floaty. And I want it to look a little bit more like I'm looking into a scene. So what we do first is we just tweak a couple things. I'm gonna go ahead and lower the exposure a little bit. Actually, looking at it, I think I may bump it up to around 210. And then looking at the walls right here, they don't look perfectly white, and my walls never do. Like I said, I always go a little bit more warm and a little bit more pink, and that's just the way I do things. But I think they look a little bit too warm, but they could also look too pink. And then let's go ahead and lower the tint down. Okay, so it was kind of a pink issue. The temperature is now looking cold, which does confirm that suspicion. So let's go ahead and, ooh, not that much. Yes. And then we're a bit wonky looking, so let's go ahead and fix that. And I'll crop the mirror out as well, so that doesn't distract. Move it down a little bit. Move it out. Cropping. It's a lot of trial and error because you want some of these elements to lead you in. And in order to lead you in, they have to, of course, be in the frame. So I think that's where we're going to land it. Then I like how all of the colors are turning out. So we are actually going to move on to brushes. I do use skin presets on just about everyone I do, just because I do add grain. And everyone's skin looks just a little bit rougher in the camera, but I am going to bump it down a little bit. So, you know, just to give you an idea, this is what clarity does. Lack of clarity does. So we're going to take that to around 20. Make my brush smaller, and you can see it just works a little bit of magic. We're going to zoom in because I really tried not to get the eyebrows or the eyelashes or the hairline, just because I do love really strong dark features. And, you know, with every type of skin tone, it's going to look different, my process for editing skin, but I have a lot of little girls with her skin tone, so I think I've gotten that process nailed down. So make sure we get her hands. And then, I don't know if you've ever come across it, but there's this fancy tool, and I believe it's default to coming up when you press the O key, but it shows everywhere that you put the brush. It looks pretty weird. I have gotten some glares at the airport when they saw this come on my screen, but I think it's super helpful because you can also see how much your brush is feathering or how much it's fading off. And sometimes you want to reduce that so it doesn't look like your subject is glowing. So I think I may take some from around the hand. I think I went a little bit wonky there. So just taking the eraser brush and whoop-de-doing it. Yep. I think I did pretty good though. Yay me. We're going to press O to turn that off so we can see how it's going. I like that level on her. I think I may reduce it just a tiny bit. There we go. And honestly, looking at it, it still feels a tiny bit warm for me. Yes, there we go. So what I do next is I have something called clothing punch and clothing smack. So I use mainly to do demande dresses, and they are so stunning, but a lot of times their details do tend to fade in camera. So if we zoom in, you can see all of these tiny little beads, and they're all different colors, and this beautiful ribbon and the tulle. And we even have some little flowers on the tulle, and these beautiful ballet shoes that were actually her mom's. And so all of these beautiful details that I feel like a lot of times get lost. So I developed these two presets, clothing punch for when it really needs a nice punch, and then also smack for when it just needs a little bit of help. So that essentially is just an enhancer, but I created these specifically for these dresses and how to highlight those. So just kind of going around. I don't really put them on the tights because then I don't want it to look like your legs are glowing, but just on the dress itself, any outliers of tulle. Let's go ahead and get that little, oops, I thought it was already picked. Go ahead and get that little bit on her hand. I usually don't do the straps because it's such a tiny surface area and I just don't want to risk it and having to go back. But then I will go into the shoe as well. Once again, not this strap, it's not what I want to highlight. And then let's do this shoe, these flowers, and these flowers up here. Yes, I know my disk space is almost full. Okay, then I may reduce the exposure a little bit on that. See what it looks like before and after. There we go. So see, it's just a little subtle pop, but I find that those little subtle pops make all the difference. So we are good with that. And then looking at her hair, her mom did the most gorgeous, gorgeous hairstyle on her. But just the way her hair is pulling, it's showing a couple spots that don't quite have as much hair as I'm sure she would normally. And so I'm going to go ahead and cover up those spots by creating a brush that has a low exposure. And so you kind of want to play around with it. Start small so that you don't go crazy. Because of course, you know, I believe she was 4 at the time. She doesn't have a full head of hair. So it's going to look weird if you start out like that. But we're just going to do this in this spot that has a little bit less hair. Not going to worry about the scalp. Sometimes I do, but I'm a fan of baby hairs. So I think we're just going to leave that Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, so even just a little bit will take away some distraction, and we can even take down the highlights. Boom! So this is where we are at right now of before and after. That preset, y'all, it's the best in the world. And then we are going to do my super secret special trick, which I'm pretty sure comes with Lightroom. I'm not a million% because I've had the Strike a Pose presets for so long, but I believe Iris Enhance does come with Lightroom. If not, Strike a Pose, definitely worth it. You come in here into the radial filters and you just draw it big enough for the subject. I don't usually worry about where the center point is. It's fine if it goes out, like if it fades out. And I invert it because otherwise it's on the outside, so I invert it. And that looks so good. And it's honestly just saturation, tiny hint of clarity, and exposure. And that's a lot of how I get my dark and moody along with my light and airy. I will go ahead and maybe bump up highlights. Yes. So, there we have it. Oops, that was definitely not it. There we have it. This is our final image. We went from this, straight out of the camera, to this. And just a quick settings. I was at ISO 200, f3.5, 1/125th of a second. I was using a flash, I believe. It might have been a constant light, but I believe it was a flash. There you have it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this helps you out a little bit. If you have any questions about editing, how I do things, feel free to ask them. I'm not at all a contender or person who supports completely copying another person's style. It's definitely a good way to start out, to learn some things of, oh, try this person's workflow on this picture and this person's workflow on this other picture. But overall, you want to find your own style. And it's a pretty cool feeling to have cultivated over the years your very own unique style. So that would be what I would really encourage you to do. But absolutely try these presets out on your own photos, try these brushes, try everything out because your work will always be yours. So thank you so much, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.